And hello, everyone. We're back with another edition of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. I'm your host, MagicMan, aka Sean Grice, and we have a very special guest in with us today. It's Mr. Chris Hine from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Sean.
No problem. Just to give a little intro for our audience, Chris, you have a very decorated academic past, a graduate of Notre Dame, covered the Chicago Blackhawks for the Tribune when they were really good, and and now you're covering the Minnesota Timberwolves after a great start to your career, Chris. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. So the last time we saw the Minnesota Timberwolves, they were walking off the floor after a tough Game 5 loss to the eventual champion Denver Nuggets. And just as a preamble, Bruce Brown, upon reflection of that championship, Chris, said that the Minnesota Timberwolves were the toughest team they faced in the playoffs. Ultimately, Chris, what do you think happened with the team that caused them to unravel? And it looked like they were kind of coming apart at the seams with Rudy and Kyle almost getting into fisticuffs on the bench. And then obviously Jordan took his anger out on a brick wall. So how do you feel that the season unraveled, Chris?
Well, it was a very up and down season, to say the least. A lot of peaks, more valleys than peaks, I think. As you referenced some of the stuff that happened late in the season, like with Rudy and Kyle, which affected their playing game against the Lakers because Rudy Gobert was suspended for that game as a result of what happened on the last day of the regular season. So I think last year was a very incomplete season for the Timberwolves. I don't think you ever really saw what they could do with Karl and Rudy on the floor at the same time. They had a small window in March where everybody was healthy. Mike Conley was there, and I feel like that's when they started hitting a little bit of their stride. They had this one West Coast road trip where they played really well, but then at the end of it, Naz Reid got hurt in a game against Phoenix, and he fractured his wrist, and he was out for the rest of the season. And then, as you said, on the last day of the regular season, not only does the fight happen, but probably more significantly for their playoff series against Denver was that Jaden McDaniels punched a wall, their best defender, and a guy whose offensive game had kept growing throughout the course of the season. He punches a wall, breaks his hand, and now he's out for the remainder of the season. So they went into that Denver series without two of their key guys, their best defender, and then a guy, Naz Reid, who I think Denver would have had a lot of issues with Naz Reid coming off the bench in those non-Jokic minutes in that series. So they didn't have him. And they came in shorthanded. Anthony Edwards played a great playoff series. I think that was the one thing that was very encouraging for the Timberwolves fan base from that series was that Anthony Edwards played phenomenal basketball. Like, he looks ready for the moment. The playoffs aren't too big for him. So I think that was very encouraging for them. And he said he learned how to play with Karl and Rudy on the floor, which was a problem for them at various points during the season. So a lot of mixed things happened with the Minnesota Timberwolves last year. And this is a very pivotal year, I feel like, for their franchise.
Absolutely. And I think everyone was, and by the way, your synopsis about the Denver series, Chris, bang on. I thought that whomever had to check Nas, whether it was going to be Jeff Green or Zeke Naji, he would have ate them up for breakfast. I agree. I agree with you there. I think Minnesota definitely would have won the minutes with Jokic off the floor. Now, when we talk about Reed and McDaniels, they re-signed Nas Reed. It seemed like Nas really likes the culture and the coaching staff, and he was more than willing to sign the deal. And obviously, Minnesota loves him as well. What about McDaniels at this point, Chris? He hasn't signed his extension yet.
Right.
And we normally know, I mean, unless you're an all-star, these extensions come down to, the midnight hour, right? So
Yeah.
do you anticipate eventually Jaden signing a deal with Minnesota? Because it seems like a fait accompli. He's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. I think he's going to make an all NBA defensive team this year if he stays healthy. I mean, it's just a given the way he gets after it. Do you eventually just see them coming to terms?
Yeah, I think so. Tim Connolly has a track record of making sure that the guys that he, prioritizes and sees as franchise cornerstones get taken care of. You can see that in Denver with Jamal Murray. You can see that with Michael Porter Jr. Like, he makes sure that if a guy is in the franchise's future plans, which Jaden McDaniels very much is here in Minnesota, he's going to get his money. It's just a matter of when, how much it's going to be. And, always one thing to remember for the fan base is, even if they don't agree to a deal and this goes into next summer, he's a restricted free agent. He's not an unrestricted free agent. So the Wolves can match any offer that comes their way. So I expect Jaden McDaniels to be a Minnesota Timberwolf for a long time here. I think it's just a matter of figuring out when and how much money that's going to be. It's always tricky when it's not a max deal. Like Anthony Edwards, signs his max deal, 2 days, whatever it was, after free agency opens, right? That's easy. It's like, okay, here's your maximum contract offer, and it's just kind of little things here and there that you have to work out. With McDaniels, it's more about threading that needle, trying to figure out probably somewhere in the mid-ish, low to mid 20 million a year. That's just me kind of spitballing and thinking about what he might be worth. I think that's probably where you end up somewhere, and it's just a matter of when.
All right. Now, Chris, when we talk about the eyeball test, Tim Connolly has said that he's on record.
Mm-hmm.
They think they figured out why it didn't work initially with Rudy, Karl, and Anthony. And I'm wondering, given your background, Chris, in analytics as well, you can kind of be very transformational here because you've seen it with your eyes and you see it on paper. What do you think went wrong?
Well, first of all, Karl didn't really play that much.
Serious calf injury.
That was serious calf injury, about a month or so into the season, and he's out until, if I'm getting my timeline correct here, mid-March. So from about mid-November to mid-March, Karl misses 50 games or whatever it is. So right away, you're losing such significant time for them to develop chemistry, for them to gel. They never really had a training camp last year either. Rudy had to take care of his body after international play, and Karl had an illness at the start of training camp last year. So they didn't even have training camp to get to know each other. So they were trying to figure it out on the fly. Karl gets hurt. Like I said, late in the season, they seem to start figuring it out a little bit, and Ant started to figure out how to play with them, and kind of figuring out how he was going to be able to navigate a lane that had Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony-Towns potentially clogging it. It's not the easiest thing for him to navigate. But he said he figured it out late in the season when I asked him that after the fact. So training camp is going to be important for them. Just trying to figure out this chemistry. Ant is the future of the franchise, obviously. But there is a now for this franchise as well. And can Karl, Rudy, and Ant all coexist? Because I don't think you could just say it's Karl and Rudy. It's Karl, Rudy, and Ant. Because what the big guys do affects what Anthony Edwards does. And that's the key question coming into training camp. That's what nobody seems to really know is going to happen once the ball tips off October 25th or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Chris, Ant got the bag this summer, and he also impressed a lot of people, including myself, with his FIBA play. Steve Kerr referred to him as the man on the team. And throughout most of the tournament, he did play like it. He did play with purposefully. It seemed like there was action behind what he was trying to do. It wasn't just laissez.
Mm-hmm. Kind of cut out here. Can you hear me? There we go. All right. Technical difficulty. Can you hear me? Are we back? I can see you. I can't hear you yet.
Okay. All right.
Oh, now I can hear you. There we go. Okay.
All right. Great.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Just going off of Anthony Edwards and his play in the FIBA tournament, Chris.
Yep.
He got the contract, so now he's a Wolf for at least 6 more years. He looked like he fit as the man with Team USA. We saw what happened last year, Chris, with some of the off-season shenanigans. How have you seen Ant's growth from a personal perspective rather than as an athlete this past year?
It's interesting. Obviously, he had the public misstep last year with the homophobic Instagram video. I think he's tried to learn from that. I think he has, just being around him every day and somebody who's openly gay myself. And it's a growth process for him, and I think he's growing in a lot of facets as a person and as a teammate as well. He's always been somebody who I think the franchise really likes his attitude when it comes to helping out his teammates and pumping up his teammates on the bench, whether he's in the game, whether he's not in the game, whether he's in practice. I think they really view him as a great teammate, and he has kind of intangible leadership qualities as well. So I think he kind of has those kind of qualities about him that is like, you look at this guy and you're like, this is the future of the franchise. And that's definitely something that I think when you're around the team every day, when you cover the team every day, you could see that his attitude is infectious. He's always got a smile on his face. He's, like I said, he's always hyping up his teammates no matter what. And you don't always see that out of young guys in the NBA. A lot of young guys, they might get a little jealous of a teammate's success, or they, if they're giving up points to, help out a teammate, or they're getting assists instead of points, that they watch out for that stuff. Guys are very aware of what their stats look like at the end of the day in the NBA. But I think Ant does care about that stuff, obviously, but I think he also very much cares about winning, very much cares about how his teammates are doing and how that affects everything. And I think he's gotten that at a younger age than most stars in the NBA have. Like I remember in the playoff series against Denver, I think it was after game 3. So they're down 3-0 in that series after that game. And he just kind of sat at his locker, stared at the floor, stared blankly ahead into his locker stall, didn't really want to talk to the media, but it just, he was just really ticked off, that they were in a 3-0 hole. And, some guys might just brush it off and say, well, it was a nice season. We got to the playoffs, try again next year. Right? He took it really hard. And I think when you see that in somebody who's 21, 22 years old, it hurts in the moment, but I think when you're a franchise looking 10 years down the road, it's like, this guy gets it. This guy knows what it's like to be in the NBA or like what it's like to be a leader. And I think he's ascending in that direction.
100%, Chris. And you're right about that. I mean, all champions have scars. They got the scars to show what it took to get there. And I think you're right. It's just Anthony is electric on the court. I know that pretty much every NBA fan just has the Wolves as a league pass team, just strictly for Anthony's just electricity. Now, when we look at the cap situation the Wolves have, Chris, so they've invested heavily in Rudy, obviously with the trade. They've invested heavily in Ant, and Karl has a hefty contract as well. When you look at the next couple of years with the prohibitive penalties coming in with the CBA, how do you feel that Tim Connolly and the Wolves scouting department can navigate around these trials, Chris? Because a lot of teams are going to have to deal with this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and that's going to come due for them next summer, especially when you factor in whatever money Jaden McDaniels is going to make as well. So that's kind of what we're all wondering here in Minnesota is what after the season is going to give. You know, who's not going to be here, who has to go, you know, how much of the luxury tax is ownership going to be willing to pay? You know, are they going to be willing to pay some luxury tax, no luxury tax? Are they going to say, screw it and let's go into the second apron? You know, what are they going to do? We don't know. We don't know the answers to these questions yet. And I think a lot of it is going to be dictated by what happens this season. If this group comes out and is a contending team for the Western Conference Finals, like, then there's every reason to try and keep this together for at least another year, and maybe go into the tax or the second apron for at least 1 year at the, you know, to attempt to try to maybe make a run the following season. You know, if they come out and the chemistry is a mess and, you know, they can't coexist on the floor together even just from a basketball perspective, then you know, maybe a teardown, you know, begins at the trade deadline. Who knows, right? We don't know. And that's why I think this season is so pivotal for the direction of this franchise, because there's major question marks that have to happen or that have to be answered at the end of this season. And I don't think they don't have enough information yet as to what direction they want to take this team. So we'll see what happens. You know, that's what I've kind of told everybody. I don't think that anybody's mind is made up as to what course of action they're going to be taking at the end of this year. A lot of it is going to be dictated by how well they do this season.
Okay, that's important to note because, as we all know, this is a brand new ownership group, and we're on the outside looking in. So it's important we get information from, you know, Chris and other reporters around the Wolves, because, like you said, Chris, they've kept things close to the vest. It really hasn't been one way or the other which way they're going to go. So you're right on point with that one. I just wanted to ask you. So when you look at the rest of the roster, there are a lot of nice young players, but it just seems the fit wasn't there last year, like you said, because of injuries. And obviously Chris had a lot of balls to juggle. He's dealing with his key players being out. He's dealing with a rotation in flux. He's also dealing with everything else going on in his life. Who's a young player on the team that's going to step up? Is it finally going to be like a Jalen Noel who finally starts hitting those threes as he did in his rookie year, or do you see a more of a Jordan McLaughlin taking a bigger role? Who do you see as an X factor for the Wolves, Chris?
You know, I think one of the signings that they made, people around the team seem to be fairly high on, is Shake Milton. You know, they bring him in from Philadelphia, and I think they have some, you know, designs on him being a potential rotation piece here in the future. Nickeil Alexander-Walker came in as a part of the D'Lo trade last year and really, when Jaden McDaniels went out, became their best defender and was starting in the playoffs because of his defense. So I think those are probably the two guys I have circled to see kind of what their roles are going to be this season. They could be significant parts of the rotation. They could be out of it by December. Who knows, right? That's kind of the life of a 7, 8, 9 man in the NBA. But I do think they envision Shake Milton being a good fit for what they're trying to do. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's a first round pick who has had some turbulence in his career with situations and a couple different teams and different coaching staffs. And he gets reunited with Chris Finch, who was one of his assistants in New Orleans. They kind of put some structure around him, ask him like, hey, do these specific things for us. Make sure you just defend your butt off and, hit open shots when they're there. Maybe you handle the ball a little bit for us. And he really thrived towards the end of last season. They bring him back on a 2-year deal. So those are the two guys I have circled kind of as the guys who might play a bigger role than people might anticipate.
All right. As we look more into who they brought in, the Wolves and Lakers essentially swapped role players. The Wolves brought in Troy Brown Jr. and the Lakers managed to get Taurean Prince. I just wanted to get your perspective on what you expect the role Taurean Prince to have on the Lakers, Chris, because I think it'll be a little bit different than that role he was asked to play for the Wolves. But I could be wrong. I just want to get your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I think Taurean Prince is a very solid player. He's a good, respected voice, kind of a leader, somebody who can command the respect of the room. I think everybody on that team, especially the guys who were on the Wolves previously, think he's a great teammate, a great locker room presence. So I think right away you're getting a guy who's going to fit in very well with the culture. I think he's a good fit with LA. I think he's a little bit of a streaky shooter, but 2 years ago he started really slow for the Wolves, but kind of halfway through the season he really turned it on and was I think above 40% even kind of the second half of that year they played Memphis. He can defend a decent number of positions. I think you saw him guarding LeBron in the playing game. He's a versatile defender. He's a good shooter, good locker room presence, like I said, and I think he was a very solid addition for the Lakers. It made a lot of sense for them to bring him in. As for what his specific role is going to be, you could probably speak more to that than I could. I haven't really gone down that rabbit hole of what specifically they're going to ask him to do, but when a guy can just knock down threes at the clip he's capable of and defend, be a not a great defender, but a solid defender, that guy's going to play some minutes. And I expect him to play a little bit for you guys.
All right, appreciate that. Yeah, I think the whole idea with bringing in Taurean Prince, Chris, I think was to have at least another volume 3-point shooter in the front court to pair it with D'Lo in the back court. I'm with you. I hope it works out. So before we head into your thoughts about the Lakers, ultimately, Chris, where do you think the Wolves slot into the West? Because we know the West is just a gauntlet. You could be in third place in January, and all it takes is a little knick-knack injury or two, and you're from third, you're looking up because you're seventh. Everything goes well for the Wolves. Do you think they're a top 6 team again, Chris?
Yeah, I think they're capable of being top 6. I mean, they were, even with all the injuries and chemistry issues last year, they were 2 games away from being top 6, whatever it was. So top 6 is definitely possible for them if they can. I mean, listen, a lot of this is based on health, right? Like somebody goes down and all of a sudden you're staring up at the playing game again. But I think for them, they want to try to be top 4, get to the 4 seed, host, have home court in that first round. I see them just myself, just kind of spitballing. I see them around 5. Like if I was to pick right now where they would finish, I would probably pick fifth.
Okay.
That's probably what I'm looking at. 5 or 6 feels about right to me for them. And I think they could be a better, almost like a better regular season team than some of the teams in the West who are going to have to, like the Lakers, for instance, who are probably going to have to monitor how much LeBron and AD are playing in the regular season, which might cost them some regular season games. Maybe the Lakers are better built for the playoffs, once you get there, but maybe the Wolves are better built for the regular season, if that makes sense.
No,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people felt that way last year, Chris.
Yeah.
I know I did. Like, you looked at the trade, you looked at the roster. It was like, well, I mean, even with an injury or two, they're probably still going to win like high 40s, low 50s.
Yeah.
I kind of still feel that way, even though, like you said, last year there were kind of bumps in the road. But like you said, it looks like the maturity is taking on a new role, especially with Ant. So where do you see the Lakers fitting into the Western Conference, Chris? Because you've had a chance to observe what every other team in the West has done. Do you still think they're a tier below, say, a Denver and a Phoenix, or do you think they're with the big boys?
I think they're with the big boys. I do. I like what they did in the offseason. I think I thought they were pretty good last year. They really found their stride in the playoffs. And even though that Denver series was a sweep, I'm sure you guys have talked about this ad nauseum on all the Laker boards. It wasn't a traditional, like, that you're getting blown out every night kind of sweep. It was like those games were pretty close. So I think Denver is in a tier by itself. You're the champions. They lost, what was it? I don't know, 4 games all last playoffs. That's a hell of a run to go through the playoffs only losing 4 games. So Denver's in a tier by themselves until proven otherwise to me. And I think the Lakers are right there on that next tier. I'm skeptical of what's going to happen in Phoenix. Like I want to see that. I think I'd rather be skeptical and wrong to be skeptical than I am to believe it and have it fall apart, because I wonder how those guys are going to make it through a season all together and with the depth they have or don't have. But I guess if everybody's healthy, I guess I would say, anytime Kevin Durant and you're able to put Bradley Beal and Devin Booker on the floor with him, if they're healthy come mid-April, then I feel like they're right there in the mix. So I'd probably put the Lakers in that second tier, and the Wolves have a chance to punch up into that tier for me, if they're able to show something in the regular season. But right now, I think that they're, like I said, they're probably around that 5-6 range until we really see it.
All right. So, before we'll let you plug yourself, sir. Just a couple of quick questions from our audience. One of our chats, Kurt Affair, says, "Chris, is Prince more of a 4 now, or can you see him still being plugged in at the 3?"
I think he's probably more of a 3, and obviously in Minnesota. I'm trying to think back. I mean, I feel like he played more 3 than he did 4. So
he did.
I don't think. I don't know what the lineup configurations are going to look like with the Lakers, but I feel like he's more suited to be a 3 than a 4.
Okay.
So I would just expect that.
All right. Appreciate the time, Chris. Before we head on out, please, sir, just let everybody know where they can find your work.
StarTribune.com. Just come to our website and subscribe if you really want to read about the Timberwolves all season. We'd appreciate it. And that's where you can find us. I'm on Twitter at Christopher Hine. And that's where I do most of my posting about the team, my main social media, if you want to follow me there as well.
All right. Oh, I've also included your Instagram page as well, Chris.
That's more personal. There's not going to be as
Okay.
many basketball updates on there. But if you want to see me play piano, you can see me on Instagram playing piano. So
That's
feel free.
Oh, Chris, I've seen
Mhm.
it. You're a wonderful piano player.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for
Yep.
coming on Lakers Fast Break, Chris. We really
Mhm.
appreciate it. And everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you later.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Chris.
All right.
Thank you.